Hello, welcome back to Life Enrichment with Hank Ballinger. Today I want to look at the question, how to know if it is a good deal, talking about buying real estate. Now, this is a great question. I've had a few people ask me recently, how do I know if it's a good deal? How do I know if it's something I need to buy? Well, again, a great question. When I first started, this has been about, I've had real estate now about 19 years. About 20 years ago, I started studying. So I studied for a year before I bought my first piece of real estate. And as I was studying, I had the same question. How do I know what's a good deal? And I had a buddy, a guy I worked with, and he said something about the 1% rule. And oddly enough, he had some real estate, and oddly enough, he was the guy that I bought my first piece of property off of. He was 8 unit in Richmond, Kentucky, and he said something about the 1% rule, so I started looking into it. Now keep in mind, this is back in the day before podcasts were really big. I got into real estate in 2004. So you didn't really have all the podcasts and all the stuff on your smartphone that you have today. So I would have to go to, I would have to read books. I would go to seminars, gone to hundreds of seminars. So back in the day, that was where you learn a lot of stuff. So when I learned the 1% rule, it really opened a lot of doors. Now, what the 1% rule is this. If someone says a piece of property is worth $1 million, well, they can say a piece of property is worth anything they want, but is it really? So if someone is asking $1 million for a piece of property, if the property is bringing in $10,000 a month, then it's worth $1 million. So $10,000 is 1% of the asking price. Now, if they were asking $2 million and it's bringing in $20,000, it's worth it. Again, $3 million, $30,000, it's worth it. So the 1% rule is a hard, fast rule that we go by when we buy and sell real estate. Now, you can adjust that 1% rule just a little bit, the larger property you buy, meaning if I bought a single family home or a duplex, I may have to look pretty hard at the 1% rule if I want to cash flow. Now, remember, cash flow is when you take all the income that you have in a month minus your expense. If you have money left, that's cash flow. So if I'm going to buy a single family home or a duplex, sometimes they don't cash flow. So you have to put a lot of money down if you want them to cash flow. And some people do that, and they're getting ready to retire. They've got to do something with their 401k or some kind of a retirement money. So they will put that into real estate and a whole lot of money down. Then that way they have some passive income to offset their expenses. And they have some income to adjust as inflation goes up. Then they can raise rent. So again, the 1% rule says if someone is asking $1 million, if it's bringing in $10,000, it's worth $1 million. So let's look at how the breakdown would go and how you will know if this property is going to cash flow. We have to look at all the expenses. So we're going to try to take a walk through the expenses, but keep in mind, every single time you buy a piece of property, this will be different. But this is a basic outline as to how you can see if a property is going to cash flow. So again, let's say the property, they're asking $1 million, and you're going to put $200,000 down, or 20%. A lot of banks will say, well, especially if it's your first deal, and you can make these numbers higher or lower. If it's a single family home, maybe they're asking $100,000, but the breakdown a lot of times is the same. They'll say, well, you got to put 20% down. So you can just adjust the numbers depending on the deal. So if someone's asking $1 million for a piece of property and you put 20% down, $200,000 down. Now, I know that number seems like a lot, especially the person we tried to appeal to with this channel is the person just getting started, the novice who really doesn't know a lot about real estate. Maybe this is your first piece of real estate. Maybe you don't have $200,000 to put down. But remember, there's a lot of ways you can break this down. Let's say you only have $100,000. And so what you do is you do a $100,000 owner finance. And we've talked about that before. Meaning the owner carries $100,000 and you will have a debt service with the bank of $800,000. The owner will carry $100,000 and you will pay him in payments each month, and you put $100,000 down. Or possibly the bank puts down 85% and they're putting up $850,000. You do a 10% owner finance, and meaning you only have to come out of pocket with 5%. All of these are possible, but for this illustration, we're going to say they're asking $1 million, you're putting $200,000 down, meaning the bank will be putting up $800,000 for that piece of property. If the bank puts up $800,000, and today interest rates are sometimes around 7%. In Richmond, Kentucky, these are very real numbers. So 7% is an interest rate that a lot of banks are charging now. You might get a little bit better than that depending on your credit score, your credit history. If you have a property already, you may get this number a little less. And you can also amortize that on a 25-year amortization, meaning it's going to take you 25 years to pay that off. They generally don't do 30-year loans like you do on your primary residence. They'll do 25 years. So here you got an $800,000 debt with the bank at 7% interest on 25 years. If you have those numbers, your payment to the bank is $8,655 per month. Now I know $5,655 a month seems like a lot to pay to a bank, but remember your income is $10,000. Now your taxes. How do you figure taxes? How will you know about how much tax you will have to put back each month? Remember, you only pay those taxes once a year. In Richmond, Kentucky, we pay them in October because we get a 2% savings if we pay them early. So, but what are the taxes? If a property costs $1 million, the tax implication that you will have is 1.1% of that. Now remember the 1% rule. If you buy something for $1 million, the 1% rule says you have to have $10,000 a month coming in. So 1% of $1 million is about $10,000. So if it's $1 million asking price, you figure your taxes at about 1.1%. Now that's in Richmond, Kentucky. Other states may vary. So you have to know what your state taxes are, what your tax implication will be. In Richmond, Kentucky, it's about 1.1%. So you figure 1.1% of $1 million. Then you divide that by 12 months in a year. And if you put back $916 out of that $10,000 that you get each month, if you put $916 back in an account, then come October, you will be able to pay your taxes. How much is the insurance? Generally, this is a general rule, and a lot of it depends on how much coverage you have on that property. Do you have a high coverage? Do you have a high deductible? Meaning if something happens, a lot of wind damage, a lot of rain, something happens, your deductible is high, your premium each month may be low. But just as a good general rule of thumb, insurance, especially in Richmond, Kentucky, is generally about 3/4 of whatever your taxes are. That's a general rule, not an exact. But there is no way to get an exact number for this because a lot of it depends on how much coverage you have, what deductible you have. So a lot of that is up to you. So the insurance is generally about 3/4 of whatever the taxes are. Now the garbage. Now we have to figure out something before we get to the garbage, and we can say, well, this is what the garbage roughly will be. If you have a $1 million property, I figured there's about 13 units in that, and right now in Richmond, Kentucky, you can get $770 a month rent. Now, where did I come up with those numbers? Well, I take $1 million and I divide that by $770 a unit, or $77,000 per unit, because if a unit is bringing in $770, it's worth $77,000. So if that unit is bringing in $770 a month, that unit is worth $77,000. So I take $1 million, divide it by $77,000 a unit, I get 13 point something units. So I just say 13 units. So let's look at, if we take $1 million and we buy 13 units, and our income is $770 per unit, we will be bringing in $10,010 per month. Now, remember, we need 10,000 to make the 1% rule work. We're getting a little over that, $10,010 a month. Now, in Richmond, Kentucky, a lot of times for 2 bedrooms right now, we're getting to 800. We're beating this. Is that a hard, fast rule? No. You got to look at your property and the type. Now, if you're bringing in $10,010, you're beating the 1% rule. This is a good deal. But remember, there's 13 units. So let's get back to, how do we know how much garbage that we're going to have to pay for? Generally speaking, in Richmond, Kentucky, at this time, garbage is generally about $5 per unit per month. Well, we have 13 units. 13 times 5 is $65 on average, what it will cost us for garbage for those 13 units. Our maintenance. This is one that can be all over the board, okay? It's kind of tough to know what your maintenance will be. How many staff do you have? How many people are you paying? How many times do you have water heaters go out, or heat and air units? How many times do you have to roofs that you've got to repair that you don't file a claim with the insurance, but you just fix them? A lot of maintenance, it's hard to figure, but let's just say on this unit, remember we got 13 units, and let's allow $100 per unit per month, meaning we allow $1,300 per month for our maintenance. Now, if you're just starting out and you want to be redneck rich and you really want to be aggressive, the more maintenance you can do yourself, the lower you keep this number and the more you will cash flow. Okay, it's all about the cash flow. So the more you keep these numbers down, the more you make this number larger, your cash flow. So let's say $100 per unit per month is our maintenance. So now we have our debt service to the bank. Most people call it a mortgage. Technically, it's not a mortgage, but let's call it a debt service. So you have a $5,655 debt service to the bank, $916 in taxes you need to pay every month. You don't technically pay it, but you'll need to have that each month setting back. $687.50 for insurance, $65 for garbage, $1,300 for maintenance. That's a total expenses every month of $8,624.16. Now remember, if we have 13 units, $770 per unit per month coming in, we have $10,010 per month coming in, minus our total expenses, means we get to keep each month, we have $1,385.84 in our pocket, our cash flow. Now, when we first bought our first piece of property and our cash flow wasn't going to be near this much, our first piece of property was an 8 unit. And I think it was like $600, $700, $800 a month. I was like, oh wow, I can't believe we're going to make that kind of money. Well, that's pretty good. If you're just getting started out, you buy your first piece of property and you're going to cash flow, that's great. But there are some other things to keep in mind. These may not be all of the expenses that you have. There's some things that we can't put in here. there may be some utilities taken out of this. Okay? So if you pay water, now in Richmond, Kentucky, every house, every apartment all has its own electric meter. So we can get the tenants to pay the electric, but not every unit has its own water meter. If someone builds a 10-unit apartment building and only puts one meter, then we have to pay that water. Now, yeah, it is reflected in the rent, and you can raise the rent and say, well, here's what your rent is, knowing that that then covers that. But if there is a leaky pipe or a toilet runs or something and that water bill's high, well, now you have a high bill. So again, utilities, we don't pay it on all, because a lot of properties that we buy in Richmond, Kentucky, they have single meters for every unit. And excuse me, if they have single meters for every unit, then we try to make sure that the tenant is paying that. So the tenant pays electric and water, and we pay just the debt service and these expenses. But sometimes there are utilities. If there are utilities, you need to allot for that and say, okay, I'm going to have some utility expenses. Am I still going to cash flow? Don't buy a property if you're not going to cash flow. That's for later on. You might, when you get a little bit of momentum going and you have some properties in your name, you could buy a property that doesn't cash flow from day one if you know you can get the rents up within a year or two, and then you can really get a big offset in your cash flow. On day one, you may not have any, but then by the time you get to month 5, 6, or a year out, 2 years out, you will have some pretty good cash flow by raising rents and fixing the property up. So just realize, utilities, I don't have in this list, but you may have some depending on the property you buy. And there will be vacancies. If someone moves out, you may have a unit vacant. Now, when we first started, remember, I was doing all the maintenance. I was doing all the fixing. I say a lot of times me and my wife, my daughter. It was a team effort. So there are vacancies. So when someone moves out, I would try to get in there and really get that unit changed around real quick. I would, if it needed flooring, we'd put the flooring down. We would paint it. We would do some of the cleaning, the fixing any small stuff that needed fixed. If it had a leaky sink, then we would fix that. All the stuff that I could fix, we would fix. So that keeps your expenses down by doing it all yourself. But also, let's look at this. Let's say you have a unit that comes available and you're getting $500 a month. Maybe you bought this property and they're paying $500 and they move out. Well, you realize if they're paying $500, that's below the 1% rule for this particular property. But if they're paying $500, but you're going to raise that. So, and let's say you bought this property less than $1 million because all the units were paying $500. So you go in and you fix these 2-bedroom units up, and you can get them to $770, but you paid the 1% rule with all of them bringing in $500. If, when they become vacant, you get in there and you fix them real quick, and then you re-rent them, now not only do you have more cash flow, but you can actually make money when someone moves out, because if you get in there and fix it up real quick and fix it up within maybe a few days, and you rent it within a week or two, yes, someone moved out at the first of the month, but by the middle of the month, you have someone in, and you not only have a high rent, but you also have a deposit. So though someone may have been going to pay $500 for that unit, they may be now paying you around $1,540. So a lot of it just depends on you, your cash flow, how quick you are to get in and really work on this. So I love the question, how do I know if it's a good deal? Well, a lot of deals are made good deals just by how much you're willing to put into it. So just realize a lot of these numbers, they're going to change every single deal you ever do. We have never done two deals that the numbers are exactly the same. It's never happened, probably never will happen. But you have got to get good at running these numbers, and hopefully you can become redneck rich. Thank you very much.